The following video was made for pure entertainment purposes only. These copyrights belong to their rightful owners. No copyright infringement and no commercial benefits intended. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use is in favor of fair use.
Dodge family stories of survival, because of their pioneering spirits, that drove them westward for a better life, while suffering many tragedies along the way. This story begins in the 1850s, up to and beyond the Civil War conflict that divided this nation, right up to the 20th century. One such story will center around a ferry boat man, named Ciscero Dodge, better known in print as C.C. Dodge. He was born in Warren County in 1850, in the state of Illinois, which was organized 25 years earlier in 1825 that had no more than several hundred settlers. Warren County was named after Dr. Joseph Warren, killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1775. Warren is believed to have been the first officer to die in the Revolutionary War. Cicero's story will also be centered around, not only his family, but through the eyes of his grandfather, John Dodge Sr., better known in print as just John Dodge without his middle initial and no suffix, and his father, John M. Dodge Jr., better known in print as just John M. Dodge without any suffix. It is obvious that some record takers, in those times, did not use any suffixes. They would distinguish between a father and his junior by providing the middle initial only to the juniors in all families. Also, a practice of the times was to transcribe only the initials of their first, and sometimes, their middle names. Ciscero Dodge's public records say he was born in 1850 in Warren, Illinois, so that is where we shall begin this story. At that time his father, John M. Dodge, his grandfather, John Dodge Sr., and his uncles, Jordan Dodge and Miles Dawson, were living and farming in Warren. Miles was married to Cicero's aunt, Lydia Ann Dodge. We find all the Dodges listed together on page 389 on line 33 within their 1850, United States, non-population schedules, from Warren County. These schedules cover all aspects of farming and do not list any family members, only the names of the farmers. The first name on that list was Cicero's father, recorded and shown as John M. Dodge. Below him, his grandfather, John Dodge, and beneath him, his uncle Jordan Dodge. We find his other uncle Miles Dawson, on page 427 on line 22. He was listed as M.B. Dawson. Let's first set the scene on how, when, and where these Dodges came from and how they ended up in Warren, Illinois. To accomplish this we must unlock the secrets of Cicero's ancestry to find out who they were and where they came from, starting with his parents by following their footsteps backwards. This ultimately led us to his great-grandfathers, Reverend Josiah Roger Dodge and Colonel John Dodge III, where we also found out they were brothers and both of these men served in the American Revolutionary War. Let's look at a map of the United States at the time these Dodges were born. The time is 1750. The areas shaded in colors represent the countries that were in control of the territory within the New World at that time. The 13 North American colonies under British rule are shown in red, the light blue, France, and in yellow, Spain. First, let's review his paternal great-grandfather, Reverend Josiah Roger Dodge, who was born September 28, 1762 in Colchester, New London, Connecticut. He married Zervia Willis on September 24, 1783. She would bear him 9 children. Their second child, a son they named John Milton Dodge, was born on January 26, 1787 in Colchester, New London, Connecticut. The very next year, Josiah would sell everything they had, and at the age of 26, move his family from Connecticut to Kentucky. Moving the family west in order to make a good life better became possible 5 years earlier, when the Treaty of Paris was signed on September 3, 1783. It concluded the American Revolution. The treaty was signed by Britain, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. In the agreement, the British ceded all of its territories from the Appalachian Mountains to east of the Mississippi River, some 160,000 acres, nearly doubling the size of the country, whereby making these lands available for the newly recognized government of the United States to sell these lands to settlers for $1 an acre. The proceeds generated from those sales was needed by the government in order to pay back the $75 million loans provided by her allies, France and the Netherlands, to finance the war. But there was one persistent problem ever since the white man landed in this country who vehemently opposed any type of settlements: the Indians. Britain, up until their signing of the treaty, restricted settlements onto Indian lands west of the Appalachian Mountain Range, but now they turned those rights over to the United States as a condition of the Treaty of Paris. Josiah, knowing all the dangers facing them, even gave up everything and everyone they ever knew, still forged ahead to make a new life in a strange land. A family like theirs can only walk no more than 10 miles a day, their journey covering over 1,000 miles, by riding, walking, and pushing along the way, would travel through Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. They would finally enter into the northern part of Virginia, seeing for the first time the Appalachian Mountain Range. They would continue traveling alongside the Cumberland Mountain Range to a point called the Tripointment of Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, to a place known as the Cumberland Gap. They have already traveled some 825 miles in 2.5 months. It will take another 3 weeks to cover the remaining 175 miles to Nolan Creek, Kentucky, about 3 miles from the town of Hodgenville, Kentucky. His wife, pregnant during that journey, had to care for their 4-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, and their 1-year-old son, John Milton Dodge. Shortly after their arrival, she gave birth to her third child, Jeriel G. Dodge, on November 7, 1788. Now let's review his maternal great-grandfather, Colonel John Dodge, who is also the brother of Josiah Roger Dodge. Colonel John Dodge III was also born in Colchester, New London, Connecticut, on the 12th of July 1751. Very little is known about his wife Anne Keene. Some say she was born in Virginia and claim they were married on December 3, 1770. The reason could be that John was always on the move throughout the West as a trader to the Indians and service to his country. Also, he was captured by the British and imprisoned over a 3-year period. But we do know they finally settled down about 1782 in Kaskaskia, Illinois. Then about 6 years later, in 1788, they moved, about 10 miles northwest, to St. Genevieve, Missouri, just over the state line from Illinois. It was there his last 2 children were born. His last child was Theodosia Dodge, the future wife of John Milton Dodge Sr. In 1770, Colonel John Dodge settled in Sandusky, an Indian village at that time, in the Ohio Territory, where he carried on very beneficial trade with the native Indians. This was possible because the Indians, for the most part, accepted traders within their territory but would kill any trappers they encountered. But within the colonies, many disputes between the Americans and the British were being hotly debated. The same year John settled in Sandusky, the Boston Massacre took place in March of that year, which resulted in the death of 5 colonists by British soldiers. Then 3 years later, the issue of taxation without representation being the divisive issue, which culminated on December 16, 1773, during the Boston Tea Party, which was a protest against the Tea Act, which gave a monopoly to the British East India Company. Then, a shot that was heard around the world happened on April 19, 1775, setting the stage for the American Revolution. British soldiers and rebel militiamen raced to Lexington during the night. They confronted each other at Lexington Green, a village common area, just as the sun was rising on the morning of April 19. Captain John Parker, a veteran of the 7 Years' War, led a contingent of 80 Lexington militiamen, known as Minutemen because they had to be ready to fight at a minute's notice. A British officer demanded that the militia disarm and disperse, and in the ensuing confusion, shots were fired. To this day, there exists considerable uncertainty over whether the militiamen or the British soldiers fired first. Regardless, the British soldiers rushed forward with their bayonets. A skirmish ensued, during which 8 militiamen were killed and only 1 British soldier wounded. John was asked by Captain Woods to attend treaty talks with the Indians in the fall at Fort Pittsburgh, which was located at the junction of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers in Pennsylvania. But on the 15th of January 1776, at his home, 20 British soldiers and savage Indians took him prisoner and marched him to Detroit, accusing him of being a patriot. They released him 9 months later. After his release, he set up business in Detroit, later the next year in 1777 relocated to an Indian village at Michilimackinac, Michigan. Then in January 1778, he, with several merchants of the town, got permission to go to Sandusky to trade. When they arrived there, he was seized by 30 or 40 British soldiers and imprisoned for 4 months there, and in May, he was placed on a vessel and sent to Quebec, Canada as a prisoner. While in Quebec, the British left him without parole or security, so John took this opportunity to hire an Indian guide and on the 9th of October 1778 escaped to Boston, Massachusetts. John arrived in Boston the next month, where he was kindly received and politely treated by General Gates, who supplied his wants and forwarded him to His Excellency, General Washington. He was politely received and sent on to Congress for debriefing. His ordeals during his imprisonments by the British would be chronologized in a narrative authored by Colonel Dodge himself and published in 1779 by T. Bradford, at the Coffee House in Philadelphia. Shortly after his release from captivity in 1779, the then governor of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson, would appoint him command of the Illinois Territory as an Indian agent. He would move to Kaskaskia, Illinois and then settle in St. Genevieve, Missouri, where he rendered aid to Roger Clark in settling the Missouri and Illinois frontiers. His duties as a government agent were recorded within the Kaskaskia records of 1778 to 1790 by Clarence Alvord and published by the Illinois State Historical Library in 1908. Josiah was also an American Revolutionary War patriot, and at the age of 19 in 1781, he courageously enlisted in the 1st Connecticut Regiment, under Major General John Sullivan at Newport, and served under Colonel Durfee. Like his brothers and so many other fellow American colonist men, Josiah bravely volunteered and proudly served through the dangers, the innumerable hardships and immeasurable sacrifices that were made for the cause of American liberty and freedom. Both Colonel John and Josiah Dodge were not the only patriots in their family that fought in the Revolutionary War. There was another brother, Israel Dodge, who later served under his brother, Colonel John Dodge, as an agent with the rank of lieutenant. And their brother-in-law, Richard Winchester, husband to their sister Lydia, he was captured by the British and held as a prisoner for 11 months before being released. More about these Dodges in future videos to come. Now let's review his grandfather, John Milton Dodge. John Milton Dodge Sr., son of Josiah Dodge and Cicero's grandfather, would marry Theodosia Dodge in Hardin County, Kentucky on the 30th of July 1811. She was born May 31, 1792 in St. Genevieve County, Missouri, and was a first cousin of her husband, John Dodge Sr. She was also the daughter of Colonel John Dodge III, who was also Cicero's maternal great-grandfather. In summary, John Dodge Sr., born in Connecticut in 1787, moved with his family to Hodgenville, Kentucky in 1788. It was here he met and married his wife, who gave birth to 5 of their 7 children, including John Dodge Jr. He would then move his family northwest, some 490 miles and over a week of travel, to Warren, Illinois, sometime after 1835. The population in Warren at about the time the Dodges arrived was probably no more than 3,000 settlers at best. Some facts about Warren, Illinois. The population of Warren was recorded in 1830 at only 308 people, then in 1840 it rose to 6,739, in 1850 to 8,176, then in 1860, to 18,366, and finally in 1870 it had a total population of 23,174 people. So who was the ancestor of these Dodges? The answer was an Englishman, named Tristram Dodge Sr., born in England about 1607 and settled in Block Island, Rhode Island. Tristram was one of the original 15 families that settled on that island, and he is Cicero's fifth great-grandfather. Block Island is an island of the Outer Lands coastal archipelago, located approximately 9 miles south of the mainland state of Rhode Island, and 14 miles east of Long Island's Montauk Point, New York. The island is coterminous with the town of New Shoreham and is part of Rhode Island's Washington County. It is named after Dutch explorer Adriaen Blok. He was a private trader and famous explorer for the Dutch Republic who is best known for exploring the coastal and river valley areas between the future New Jersey colony and Massachusetts Bay Colony during 4 voyages from 1611 to 1614, following the 1609 expedition by Henry Hudson. He is noted for naming Block Island Rhode Island, and establishing early trade with the Native Americans of the region, and for the 1614 map of his last voyage on which many features of the mid-Atlantic region appear for the first time, and on which the term New Netherland, now New York, is first applied to the region. Chapter 1. Introduction to the Dodge family members in Warren County, Illinois in the 1850s. In Warren County, Illinois, the census was taken on September 13, 1850, which was about 2 months before C.C. Dodge was born. We see 4 Dodge families listed on the same page. First, his father, John M., listed on line number 18 as John M. Dodge, age 38, was a Christian preacher and farmer, with a real estate valued at $700. His mother, Margaret, age 36, and his 4 brothers, Alex, age 14, Robert, age 12, John, age 10, Damaris, age 7, and Seth, age 2. Both of his parents were born in Kentucky. The children were all born in Illinois. Listed next, his aunt's family shown on line 25, her husband Miles Dawson, age 37, born in 1813 in Kentucky, and wife, Lydia Ann Dodge Dawson, age 35, also born in Kentucky. Their children were John A., age 12, Mary, age 8, Robert, age 2. All the children born in Illinois. But in past years the Dawson family had lost 3 children. James, an infant, died in 1841, Nancy Francis, died in 1847 at the age of 2, and Elizabeth, an infant, died in 1848. Listed next is his grandfather, Father John Dodge Sr., on line number 30. He also listed without his middle initial in order to prevent confusion between him and his son. John Sr., age 62, born in Connecticut, Theodosies his wife, age 56, born in Missouri, and his 2 youngest daughters, Nancy, age 20, born in Kentucky, and Louisa, age 16, born in Indiana. Listed next on line number 34, is his uncle Jordan and his family. His name is spelled incorrectly as Laura and Dodge, age 31, his wife Mary, age 22, his daughter Elizabeth, age 4, and his son Newton, age 2. Also living with Jordan is a 9-year-old girl named Amanda J. Taylor. John Dodge Sr. Other families members were as follows. His second oldest daughter Mary J. Dodge, who was born February 20th, 1822 in Kentucky, died on August 1st, 1831 in Warren, Illinois at the age of 9. His third oldest daughter Elizabeth lives with her husband in the township of Knox, in Hendersonville County, Illinois, about 124 miles, south of Warren County. In their 1850 census she is 23 years old, born in Kentucky, who married Dr. John Woodruff in 1849. Their son, Alva C. Woodruff, who was not listed in the census, was born on July 2, 1850, and was considered a newborn baby and therefore in most instances not listed in the census. 1850 Farming in the United States. compared to the Dodge farms, in Warren County, Illinois. In the 1850s, there were about 1.75 million farms in the United States with an average of 200 acres per farm. Based on these numbers, both John Dodge Sr. and his son Jordan farms were half the size of the average farm in the United States, and John Dodge Jr.'s farm was 1/4 the size of the national average. We know this because within their 1850 United States selected federal census, within the non-population schedule, within Warren County, Illinois, on pages 388 and 389, it recorded the size of their farm, types and number of livestock, crops they grew and the quantity they produced, and dollar values associated among certain aspects of their labor. So let's look at their 1850 agricultural records for our ancestors, which were transcribed on a copy of that form. While doing so, we noticed that Miles Dawson's schedule did not list any farm information such as farm acreages or crops raised or any dollar values associated within his schedule. The absence of this information would mean that Miles was a sharecropper, most likely on one of his relatives' farms, but Miles did own farm animals, which we will call out when comparing the Dodge farms. In comparing each farm, the first value will be John Dodge Sr., the second number will John M. Dodge Jr., the third will be his uncle, Jordan Dodge, the fourth will be his uncle, Miles Dawson, when comparing the number of farm animals. Acres of farmland improved: John Sr. 115 acres, John Jr. 45, Jordan 115 and Miles, none. Unimproved farmlands: John Sr. 71 acres, John Jr. 63, Jordan 25 and Miles, none. Cash values of farms: John Sr. $1,100, John Jr. $700, Jordan $1,300 and Miles, none. Cash value of farm machinery: John Sr. $50, John Jr. $100, Jordan $74, Miles, $90. Horses: John Sr. 3, John Jr. 3, Jordan 10 and Miles 2. Asses and mules, 2 by Jordan only. Milking cows: John Sr. 2, John Jr. 3, Jordan 3 and Miles 4. Other cattle: John Sr. 1, John Jr. 3, Jordan 2 and Miles 5. Sheep: John Sr. 14, John Jr. 30, Jordan 24 and Miles, 12. Swines or pigs: John Sr. 15, John Jr. 70, Jordan 50 and Miles, 35. Dollar value of livestock: John Sr. $266, John Jr. $340, Jordan $660 and Miles $272. Crops produced during the year ending June 1, 1850, in these categories Miles had none. Wheat: John Sr. 100 bushels, John Jr. 150, and Jordan 120. Indian corn: John Sr. 800 bushels, John Jr. 1,300, and Jordan 1,200. Oats: John Sr. 200 bushels, John Jr. 120, and Jordan 300. Wool: John Sr. 40 pounds, John Jr. 16, and Jordan 88. Peas and beans: John Sr. 10 bushels, John Jr. 8, and Jordan 25. Butter: John Sr. 50 pounds, John Jr. 100, and Jordan 600. Hay bales: John Sr. 2 tons, John Jr. 5, and Jordan 12. Value of homemade manufactured: John Sr. $30, John Jr. $30, and Jordan $75. Value of animals slaughtered: John Sr. $100, John Jr. $50, and Jordan $100. After looking at these numbers, you could safely say the Dodge farms were about 1/2 size of the average farm in the United States, but in this county the average size farm was about 50 acres. There were 32 pages of census information containing 1,300 farms. From this information it looks that they had an above average producing farm for their times.